So our tax base was, in addition to the 2.5, was growing by 2.5 to 3 million a year, which is unusual, and we don't have that today. So that's part of where some of the pressure comes, in addition to the mandates and other things we're talking about.
Okay. My question, to follow up with regard to that question, although there is a sort of a loud voice that seems to be scapegoating public employees, the New York Times has published, data that says that an overwhelming majority of Americans support the process of collaboration between management and public employees, the process of collective bargaining. How do you hope to, mirror that support, and how do you hope to work collaboratively with the teachers' union in the future? And go with Mr. Gottlieb.
Okay. And I do want to say and echo Dennis's comments about, people love their teachers. They love their teacher, I should say, when you talk to them, but they don't love the teachers, right? And there is an issue with that. I have an issue with that, but I just want to point out that people very, very, very strongly. I mean, there are great teachers in this town. And going to that, I think we've got to be able to sit and look each other in the eye and say, and respectfully, I don't agree with you, and we have some real challenges, and there's a history of that in Andover, that's sort of the bottom line, to say this isn't personal as much as it may feel that way. We respect what you do. We respect the choice that you made to go into this career. It's a noble profession, and we trust you with educating our kids. I mean, that's huge, and yet we have a challenge, and we need to meet that together, and the perspectives are different, and that's normal. The key is finding a way to sit and look each other in the eye and get to some middle ground. And by the way, I believe that a lot of this is going to be played out in a variety of different venues around the country. I don't feel like it's all our responsibility and that we can do it all here. There's going to be a lot of things that are going to happen elsewhere that will influence and inform our discussions, and that's good. It's a good process if we can be civil and respectful.
Yeah, I think two parts. One piece, in terms of the collective bargaining piece, I'm very much in favor of collective bargaining and the rights of the unions, and we need to continue that, and that's hopefully what we're doing. I can't go further than that because it starts to bump up against any specific collective bargaining issues. But I'm very serious about the changing of the climate and, to some degrees, the culture of our educational community here. And I'm very hopeful that seeing the leadership of Dr. McGrath, one of her great skills is team building and getting people to work together. And the leadership that Dr. Sharkey has shown in the high school since October has had a very, very positive impact from what I've seen firsthand, as well as information that kind of comes back to us. Comments that are made by parents, teachers, others. So I'm very hopeful that the leadership that is in place will bring us in a different direction of much more collaboration, working together, mutual respect, and taking on the difficult challenges that every community faces. We're not unique. These are tough economic times around the country, around the world, and it's easy when there's a lot of money on the table. When that pot gets that pot gets smaller, that's where you start seeing the factional kind of stuff occur. So hopefully their leadership will get everybody moving in a similar direction. I don't think you'll ever go in exactly the same direction all the time, but at least for the most part, moving together to improve the schools and the opportunities for students and their achievement here.
Okay. Other questions from the faculty?
Yeah, I'm Patrick Patterson of the Social Studies Department at the high school. It's the analysis in terms of fiscal issues is very interesting because It's as though we're accepting it as a kind of fact that exists out there. And given the fact that we have a certain amount of money, we can allocate it in certain sorts of ways, and that we really don't have any more money to increase the funding, you know, in terms of public services, et cetera. And, you know, in the current economic climate, many people have used this as an opportunity in some ways to basically argue their particular view in terms of fiscal solutions, that we in fact have spent too much, that we need to basically cut back our expectations, and things like this, okay? And the question I have for you is really, is Andover in that position? Because I think in some ways Andover, or at least the people who are at this point in the leadership in Andover, are exploiting a bad economic situation when Andover is not in that situation. They have 167% of the state average in terms of personal household income compared to other households in other communities in the state. We, or you, are very wealthy. And I think what it is that there's a reluctance on your part to actually do the political work that needs to be done to shift the direction in the town. I would like to know, what could you do to shift it in a direction? I mean, Mr. Ford, you've been talking about the way in which we need to improve the perception of the schools and the school committee and everything else. But I think there's also something else that you need to do. And I think you found out that there was a constituency among the public in the meeting in last year at the town, where they basically allocated funds to close up the gap in the school budget, okay? There is that base of support. What would you do to basically argue before the town to basically increase funding for the schools when you know it's there, okay, and change the direction that we're going? The last 2 years have been a disaster. Cuts every year, increased class sizes. It's getting tough to teach the way we used to. The quality is falling. That's my question.
Mr. Ford.
You know, I do think, you know, in part one, to gain the funding that we need to support the schools, it does go back to credibility. If the community does not see and did not see us in a highly credible light, and I think we're moving, as we've talked about this afternoon, directions to change that. I think the second piece, the most immediate opportunity, and which is going on as we speak, to advocate for additional funds to close this $1 million gap. And you know, one of the opportunities is to revisit the whole issue of how we share the responsibility townwide for out-of-district special education tuitions. I think that's one of the most highlighted issues and opportunities. And those conversations are going on. There are people that are listening and hopeful that from comments have been made that, you know, we'll get that compromise done, and, you know, we'll actually bring in, you know, additional dollars. Last year, we actually negotiated the FY11 budget, where the schools received a 3.6% increase over FY10, or in FY over FY10. The towns received a 2.0 increase over FY10. So we did, you know, unfortunately, it was still a small pot, but the schools, you know, received, you know, almost double the amount of increase that the town side did. So there is a lot of advocating going on. The question is, you know, how large is that pie? And we need to continue to advocate for the schools. That's our job.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that, and that's in terms of the political work that it takes now. And I don't feel we've been doing enough about it, the leadership in the town. Now, I don't want to say in their defense, but I would say I could argue that in their defense, they've tried perhaps over the years, some of them, and feel like they're beaten down, and we haven't supported an override in the past, and so now, you know, the hands go up and say, you know, people have said they don't want it. And by the way, if Andover doesn't want it at some point, now I'd argue we're not at that point yet. I'd argue we have to do the political work and we have to educate people so that they understand what they're actually voting on and they're not just taking out their anger on the situation throughout the country on the children of Andover, which is sort of, you know, how it seems to me. But that political work is going to be hard because, as I've said, people in Andover, just like everywhere, regardless of their economic situation or their economic status. And by the way, as a financial advisor, I will tell you that working with people in town, they don't feel, you know, they are under stress too. There's a lot of people living in Andover, just like living throughout this country, who, you know, are stretched thin. Do well, but they got a big house and they're trying to keep up their payments, just like people in lesser houses. I mean, they don't feel it. Do we have more money? We do in this town than other communities, absolutely. But that's where that political work comes in, to help educate them on why they need to perhaps, or might want to spend more money in order, because of all the things that are causing us to not have enough money for the schools. And it's an educational process. I think we all need to be talking about it. I went to, again, a gathering last night with some people, and it's that kind of work that I would do, is go out and ask people, say, what do you think's going on? This is what I've learned. Let me tell you about what's going on. I would like to see a blog. Now, I don't know if we can do that within the context of this school committee. I don't see why not, where we, you know, corporate CEOs are putting blogs out there so that they can, you know, steer the perception, because the information's all out there. So if they don't control the perception and try and tell the truth from their perspective, then you know, it's being controlled elsewhere. So we need to do that as the leaders of this town, to say, here's what we know, pay attention, please.
Okay, we'll take one more question from the faculty, if there's.
Hi, my name is Brian Parker, and I'm a social studies teacher here at Andover High School, also a resident of Andover, and I had both of my children come through the school system here. I have two questions, and I'll just start with one, and perhaps if this time I'll ask the other as well. Mr. Ford, you brought up in your last answer about the special education budget, and I won't beat a dead horse in that today that we found out how the special education department at the high school has been eviscerated. But several years ago, there was a program at the high school that worked with alternative students. That program basically was, other than the cost of the 2 and then 3 teachers that were part of that program, it cost $300 a year. With $3.5 million in outside placement costs at the high school, why isn't a program like that? Why, first of all, why was it abandoned? And secondly, why isn't it being reinstated to bring some of those students back from outside placement?
That's a great question, and I'm glad you asked it. I agree. I don't know why it was abandoned. It was before my tenure. Dr. McGrath, when she came, was in fact surprised that it had been. And Dr. Sharkey has certainly acknowledged to me individually, you know, concerns about having that kind of capacity. And we need to go there immediately. I mentioned earlier the success on the elementary level. Our greatest area of need right now is the high school. And so the question needs to go to the leadership, you know, to the faculty, to the special education faculty, is what do we need to be doing differently at the high school? Out of the 92 students that are out of district, 57 are at high school age. So, and the bulk of them are junior and seniors. So we should have a low-hanging fruit opportunity here. What could we do differently? I think it's deplorable that that program went away. I don't know why, and again, before my tenure, but I'm hopeful. I have spoken